Hello, everyone, and my name is Tony Reeves, and thank you very much for joining me for another edition of the Reeves Reflection. Today, I want to reflect back on what it means to drive to the next level of your success. Now, that's going to sound corny when you hear it on its face, but when I say drive to the next level of your success, I want to set this up for you. So here we are. It is October of 1995. And now I find myself in this great position that I have finished my graduate school, and I've now been commissioned as a young officer at the United States Navy. I'm staying in Tampa, Florida, and so now I've got to go to my next duty station or my first duty station for training before I went to arrive at my permanent duty station. So I had to go from Tampa, Florida to Newport, Rhode Island. And so as a result, I had to basically get everything shipped up, packed up and everything. I did the long way. I drove from Tampa, Florida to Pine Bluff, Arkansas, which is where I'm from. Spent a week there. Then I drove from Pine Bluff, Arkansas to Newport, Rhode Island. The reason why I call this a drive to success is because at the time I was making this drive, I was actually at a crossroads of my life. I had just finished my master's degree, but I didn't have any job opportunities. I was at a job that I had been in for 3 years that I didn't see any growth opportunities, and I didn't really like being there. I found myself in this position where I attained the degree, which is what my goal was. I was maxed out in terms of my job opportunity, in terms of that particular job. I wasn't getting any job offers. I applied a couple of different places, but I wasn't really getting any response. And so I didn't know what my future was going to hold. And so one of my good friends one of my close friends, Gwen, and she noticed that I was going through this moment of not really knowing what I was going to do with myself. She told me sometimes in order for you to take that next step to the next level, you've got to change the things that are going on around you. You've got to shift things wholeheartedly. So when I got commissioned as an officer, I didn't tell anyone. Meaning nobody knew that I was going through the process of becoming an officer. So here I am in Tampa, a place where I went to undergrad and graduate school with a bunch of friends and fraternity brothers and everything like this. And I'm kind of quietly going through the motions of submitting my application, going through the physicals, giving them everything they needed. And then I got commissioned. And when I got commissioned, it was a whirlwind. I mean, I literally got commissioned on one day. I had to break my lease the next day. I had to schedule the guys to come move me out. And then I was driving back home. The greatest part about that was that it gave me the chance to do something that I hadn't done. Slow down and breathe. I mean, think about it. When you're moving 100 miles an hour, and for my case, I'm sitting here, I'm rocking and rolling, I'm, going to graduate school, I'm in my 20s, because I'm like 25 at the time, going on 26 when I got my master's degree. I'm in Tampa, an area where I pledged my fraternity in undergrad. A lot of my college undergrad friends were still in the area, so I'm in that window where you're going to the clubs on a regular basis and hitting the streets on a regular basis. But the reality is that I didn't really know what my future was going to look like. I had no clue whatsoever. And so as a result, I didn't really take the time to pause and think about what my next steps were going to be. And so finally, after, even after getting sworn in and getting my stuff moved, it was still a whirlwind. I had to stop to take a moment to breathe. But when I left Pine Bluff, I had to report on a Friday. I think it was like November 3rd, 1995. So I left on that Wednesday, November 1st, if I remember correctly. And what I did was I drove from my hometown to my cousin's place in Nashville. Now, what's fascinating for me was that you got to keep in mind, this is 1995. So we're talking no cell phone, no GPS, no satellite radio. When I got in that car, nobody was going to hear from me unless I pulled over to the side of the road and got on the payphone and called someone from a payphone. So here I am. I get in the car and I drive, from Pine Bluff to Memphis, which is a familiar drive. I've done that before. I've done the ride before, so I was familiar with that. But then once I crossed through Memphis on I-40 going to Nashville, it was all brand new. I had never been on this route before. So I get to Nashville, spend the night with my cousin, and then the next morning I then proceeded to drive from Nashville to upstate New York because I had to report on that Friday. So I basically left his place on a Thursday, drove to upstate New York so I could stay over at a hotel. But the best part about that drive was that it was so peaceful. I mean, keep in mind, we're talking, like I said, there weren't no satellite radios at the time, or at least if there were, no, there was no satellite radio at the time. The internet was not prominent. It was coming up, but it wasn't like the vehicle that it is now. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a smartphone. So back in the days, as silly as it may seem, I had these tape cassette, and I had a tape cassette CD adapter so I could put a CD player on my dashboard if I needed to. But during that time, there was no way for anybody to call me. So there was no calls. There were no text messages. There were none of those things that you think about that tends to, disrupt your train of thought. I literally disconnected. And when I did that, I never realized how much I had been through. So you're talking about making this drive, and I'm making this drive here, and it is not even crossing my mind all the things that I've been through. And while I was sitting there the whole time, I literally had an opportunity to just relax and just really just kind of process what I had been through. And it was interesting because when I was sitting there, and I can tell you it was probably even more profound in the middle of the night, is that I had a chance to really reflect on everything I was going through. Because keep in mind, from Nashville to Newport, and I didn't stop, I stopped basically right outside of Newport. It's like 12 and a half hours. So I literally drove probably about a good 10 hours till I found a place to crash and then basically rode the rest of the way in. But for me, as I was driving, I had sensory overload. One, because I was driving through a part of the country I'd never been before. I'm driving through Tennessee, and then I have to cut up through Kentucky and through Virginia and West Virginia, and I'm now cutting up through Pennsylvania. I am seeing all kind of different things, and the funny part is because when I was in dead spaces, i.e. because I didn't have a satellite radio, I would play my, I had it was funny, I had mixed tapes. But for those of you who don't know, for those young people who'd like mixtape, yes, back in the day, we used a thing called mixtapes. These were tapes that we prepared in advance that had a variety of different music. Well, guess what? Most of those tapes, like most of us, we left them in the car. So you could always tell the difference between like a new album you bought and an old mixtape because the quality was so different. So I'm sitting here basically listening to two albums. I'm listening to a group called Intro, their second album, and an artist called Faith Evans. I was listening to her first album. And so as I was driving and it was getting darker, I was caught up and absorbed in the fact that I started just thinking about everything. And the fascinating part is that after a while, I stopped thinking about the past and started wondering about the future. Once I found myself in Pennsylvania and parts of DC and so forth, and starting to realize that this is a whole new different part of my life, I literally got caught up in the reality that this was going to be a brand new start, which then caused me to segue into trying to think about what is my world going to look like. Because at this particular point, I'd never been to Rhode Island. I'd never served in the Navy. This is my first time as an active duty officer in the naval capacity because I was commissioned as an Army Reserve officer, but not on active duty. And so now I have no idea what to expect. So I would probably say that the first half of the drive was really me spending time dwelling about all my decisions. But then the second half of the drive, the next was really more focusing on the fact that I now am at a crossroad of my life where everything I've got going forward is going to be brand new. Everything that I'm going to be trying is going to be a brand new experience. And it was invigorating. I just didn't know how to process that information. And I can tell you, by the time I got to New York, stayed at a hotel, and I woke up in the morning, I was completely refreshed. I'm not trying to say that that trip purged me of all my issues. I still had my insecurities. I still had my low self-esteem. I still had all the doubts that were weighing on my heart and my head from all the things that had happened. But the reality is, at the first time, my brain was free of chaos. I wasn't thinking about all kind of crap. Being disconnected from the community that I had been in, being disconnected from all of the drama that I had been exposed to when I was in school and when I was in graduate school and at my old job, was gone. Because guess what? I was going someplace where I was going to be meeting new people, doing new things, and going down a new pathway in my life that I never realized would be even possible. And I want you to understand and appreciate this fundamental point as you're going forward in your life. You're going to find that there are going to be times in your life where you've been exposed to so much chaos that you need to have a break. You need to disconnect. You need to move away. You need to go do something completely different. Because sometimes the only time we can think clearly is when we disconnect ourselves from all of the craziness that causes us to have our head spinning. For me, that brief moment, that 10-hour drive from Nashville to Newport was a key part of my success and my growth going forward, because I needed to have that moment to reflect on the things that I've done that I needed to grow from, and the excitement, enjoyment, and the peace of knowing that I've got a clean slate in front of me. Everyone deserves to have a clean slate. Sometimes having that clean slate is necessary in order for you to have that drive to success. And if you ever have the opportunity to have a pivot, take that opportunity, enjoy the peace and the quiet and the disconnect, and use that as an opportunity for you to breathe and look at the future in front of you for all the greatness and the mystery that's in store. All right, everyone. Again, this is another edition of the Reeves Reflection, and I thank you. You know, I have other platforms you can check out. I encourage you to see In the Know with Tony Reeves. You can listen to Reeves' Point of View. You can listen to all these great programs that we have, and I can tell you with the greatest degree of confidence, I look forward to having you back here again. And as always, if you have any questions, you always have to go back to my original question, because I always tell people at the end of the day, there's one thing that you need to ask going forward. If you don't know, let me be the first to tell you. Are you ready for the Anthony Reeves experience?